Are we all in Phoenix today? Everyone want to maybe drop in the chat where they're coming in from? I will tell you that I am outside of Detroit, Michigan on a work project today. Here, about to work with a customer to do a case study for the software technology company that I work for. Love to see where everyone is coming in from in the chat. Got back from class in Tempe. I'm jealous. I bet it's a great time of year to be in Tempe. Everyone getting back on campus. Brandon in Phoenix, nice. What is going on in Phoenix right now? I bet it's still, I'm in West Phoenix. It's still pretty hot out there. It's unbelievably like 62 degrees right here in Michigan. It feels really, really nice. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here in just a moment and open up the presentation. Well, if my computer wants to cooperate, there we are. Okay. So let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen? Yes, you can see my screen. Beautiful. Thank you all. Okay. We will jump right into it then. Thank you for, oh, hang on. We got more people I think I have to admit. Maybe I'll just wait a second here to make sure we get everyone in before we get started. Miriam, thanks for joining. Appreciate you. We'll give it 30 more seconds and we'll jump in. And we're going to keep this very brief. I know you're all here for extra credit, and we'll make sure you get your screenshot and get on with your day because I know you're all very busy with your studies. Are we all third-year undergrads in the School of Engineering, or are we taking this course from another school within the great Arizona State University? Can we just drop that in the chat, kind of your academic matriculation, your major, your school? Like to understand a little bit who we're talking to. Second year engineering, nice. Well, this is an excellent course, very unconventional in engineering. WP Carey School of Marketing, nice. That's what I do for a living, Ethan. I'm a professional marketer, have been for 16 years. A lot of the examples you'll see in here stem from my background in marketing. This is a really unique course that I think, at least the lectures that I try to provide, are the intersection of where engineering, i.e. kind of product creation and product development, intersect with sales and marketing. Okay, so it's 5 minutes after. We're going to get rolling now because you all have been very patient with me. Thank you very much. Okay. So the 7 Cs of Entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk through some examples of the first of the 7 Cs from several tech companies that I've worked for. And then as well, I'm going to let you know that throughout the course of the semester, I've invited several of my former colleagues and some current colleagues to also provide these lectures. They are some of the smartest, most accomplished, most innovative, most creative people I've had the pleasure of working with. So even if you weren't getting extra credit, they're people that you're going to want to come and listen to for 15 minutes because they're just highly, highly successful in their career, and you'll get a glimpse into what it takes to think at a very mature level of a successful professional. Today, we're going to talk about the first of the 7 Cs, care, right? You know, cash is probably the most important of the seven C's because ultimately that's what drives every business is, having people exchange whatever it is you've produced for cash. But all of the six preceding ones, I think, have this tremendous ability to help you think more clearly about how you get to that final stage of generating cash. And I can tell you in my career, the people that I've invited to speak in these guest lecture courses, they're not incidental or accidentally successful. They care deeply, not just about their career or how they've done in the company they've worked for, but about the customer and how they solve the customer's problems. So in care, we're speaking, about the domain and the problem and how that leads to an opportunity that you can then convert into an insight vessel. So this gets down to who you will help, right? And who might pay and how we might solve that problem for the people you care about. These are the three companies we're going to talk about briefly in my examples of care and as it relates to the success I've had in my career, limited as it may be, applying this first of the seven C's. With Synovia, we'll talk about student transportation. At Sonic U, we'll talk about caring deeply about patient safety and regulatory compliance in hospitals and labs and how that expanded into a new market. And with Vestige, we'll talk about caring deeply about long-haul truckers and the challenge they have on the road. However, these conversations that we're having, these lectures, will also focus a little bit on what I like to call some magic words. What you'll find in your career, even those of you that are engineers that will spend a whole bunch of time dug into the problems, is that your ability to leverage the right word or words and avoid the wrong word or phrases will have a incalculable impact on your ability to be successful, both internally with your colleagues and externally doing your marketing and sales of your product. We're going to talk a little bit about I versus you as we at the end of this presentation, but I want to introduce this first and kind of do a little preface of the difference between I and you as it relates to the way you interact with others. Okay, so caring deeply about your customer. So for me, this was first matriculated or brought to the fore in a way that I'm, I think forever proud of and can look back on an example of caring deeply about my customers in 2020 during the days of COVID. And we had a solution at a company I worked for called Synovia Solutions that was owned by a publicly traded company called CalAmp, in which we had a solution that checked students, oftentimes K through 5 students, on and off the school bus. This was mainly used for parents to help them understand that their kindergartner, first, second grader, who might have walked 3, 4, 5 blocks to the school bus early in the morning, actually got on the bus safely and got off at the right place at the right school. And then the same at the end of the day, got off the school bus and were heading home. This was in many ways, a luxury item for school systems and was not a widely adopted product until COVID struck, and we found out that some of our customers had actually adopted this, unbeknownst to us, without any prodding from us, to conduct contact tracing on the school bus, i.e. knowing which students were on which bus, with other students who may have been infected with the COVID-19 virus. You could have just taken this information and tried to go out and resell the product in a way that didn't really make any material change in what you were already selling, i.e. we already had the technology. But what we did was innovate the product, not only with the name that we came up with called Bus Guardian, but more importantly, we created features within the software that allowed the transportation department to very quickly identify students who had the virus and show how long they were on the bus. Because as most of us know from our time in school, when you're on the school bus, some students are the very first student picked up and might ride the bus for 40 minutes. And some students might be the very last student picked up and might ride the bus for just 7, 8, 9 minutes, right? And your ability to impact others on the bus could be impacted by the amount of time you were on the bus and also where you sat on the bus. So we were able to innovate our software to show who was on the bus the longest amount of time and where they sat in relation to other students. So you don't do this just to make money, right? Obviously, it was an opportunity for us to sell more of this product, but first you had to care deeply about your customers and the problems they were trying to solve, because we were doing this under an enormous time crunch to deliver it to our customers. So this is an example that many of you will see in your career as you get out there in the real world and are working on problems, that the customer will do things with your product that you never intended them to do, or you never had the creativity or the vision or the ability to connect the dots the way the customer does in the real world. And it's your job to care deeply about your customer and understand how that can be applied to people just like them. That's how we did it at Synovia. At SonicU, we took that same methodology of caring deeply about our customer and had our temperature monitoring solution. So this was a piece of software that would be placed in a medical fridge or freezer and be used to track the temperature for drugs and plasma and blood and organs. Think of anything that can be perishable in a hospital environment, which is, you know, a lot of things that are critical to people's health and well-being inside of a healthcare environment. And thought about how do we apply that to other verticals. And first, you have to care about these other verticals. The thing you'll learn when you get out there in the real world is that the customers you try to sell to can very quickly sniff out, just by the way you interact with them and the way that you manage the calls and the way that you show up at their events, who truly cares and who is just there to, you know, drive additional profitability. Of course, all of our job is to make money, but first we have to care deeply. And our ability to show that we cared first about these healthcare clients and the way we spoke about them and the evidence of how we innovated our product to serve them showed when we went into the food market that we were a legitimate provider who cared deeply about our customers. And that same care would translate into the way we took care of K-12 customers. So this idea of care is something that, as that earlier slide showed, has to be done courageously, which is to say authentically, because customers can sniff this out when you're trying to fake it, right? And will often lead to you being not successful in the things you're trying to do. Finally, my current role. I know one of you said you're in marketing. I do marketing for a tech company now, and I am in Michigan working with a customer telling their story about something that looks a lot like this, right? You might have seen these billboards around lawyers looking out for people injured by big trucks. What you're probably not aware is that there is a full-blown assault on the long-haul trucking logistics industry by law firms to ensnare them in lawsuits associated with accidents, sometimes very minor accidents, sometimes serious accidents that can bankrupt these companies. The company I work for now is called Vestige. We make the safety cameras that are placed in the dash and on the sides and on the rear of these vehicles to capture what really happens in accidents. Again, You have to care deeply about your customers and be able to get in their shoes and see the world through their eyes to understand the problems they have. The problems they have aren't just about the driver safety, right? Which is often what people think dash cams are about, is keeping the driver safe. It's often about these third-party risks they face out there in the world. When you see these billboards on the highway, you might think that lawyers looking out for the motoring public, when in fact many of these lawyers are running very sophisticated organizations that are, I got to be careful how I put this, but they're not always using the most ethical means to go after these truckers. And in some cases, there's even fraudulent rings of lawyers, physicians, and people who stage accidents that are going after these big trucks to get these giant settlements out of them. So you have to care deeply about your customer and get into their shoes, talk to them all the time and understand the way they view the world, to understand when they see a sign like this, a billboard like this, they see a risk that could put them out of business, right? And it's your job to develop products and solutions like we do at Vestige that helps them combat that threat. So I hope that made sense as it relates to caring deeply about your customer. Now I want to get to the thing that I think is every bit as important as the caring, which is the way we speak when we speak to each other, and especially when we speak to clients. So most of us, most of the time, have a script in our head where we're talking and thinking about ourselves. So we're saying the word I or me all the time to ourselves. And this often translates into the way we communicate with others. I feel this, I think that, I'm confused, I'm hurt, I'm this, I'm that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. I mean, we're all very much focused on advancing our own interests in the world. However, if you say I and me too much, especially in front of the customer, it can be counterproductive to your ability to show that you care and to be empathetic to your customers' needs. So what I like to advise, and what I try to do as a professional, has been, writing emails and interacting with people professionally, both, again, internally and externally, is try to phrase things by leading with you, right? So instead of I feel this way, say you, how do you feel? How do you think? How are you reacting to this? And let that drive a conversation forward. This can be hugely transformational and transformative in the way you interact with others and the way you think about the world and your clients. It sounds very simple. I promise you, it is not. It is a difficult thing to do, to turn off that voice in your head that is always focused on I and move it over to you. Does that make sense to this group? Do we all find ourselves from time to time, thinking too much about I and me and not focusing on the you as much as we should? I'm looking for answers in the chat. No one has to necessarily speak up at this moment. Ethan, thanks for the note. And yeah, I think we all definitely do that. My job as a professor and as a lecturer, I hope, is to both show you examples of how to apply the 7 Cs, but also how to share some of these kind of heuristics to think through as a professional. And I promise you, as you sit down to write emails, both to your friends, your families, and especially in a professional environment, the more you can leave out the word I or me, and the more you can focus on the you, the person you're addressing, the party you're addressing, the person you're trying to collaborate with, the more successful you will be. So I hope that makes sense. I know it sounds super simple, but believe me, it is something most of us struggle with for most of our lives, which is getting out of our own heads and putting other people first. But I promise you, if you do this, it will unlock tremendous opportunities for you in your life and your career. So we've been talking now for 17 minutes. I don't want to eat up any more of your time because I know you got a lot going on. I thank you all for coming. As I said, we've got many more lectures throughout the semester that will focus on the 7 Cs, and again, I've got a series of guest lecturers that I think you'll really enjoy and be able to share some tremendous learnings from their careers, like I showed you today, that will hopefully help you think more holistically about entrepreneurship, about business, and ultimately about being successful as a professional once you graduate university. So again, thank you for joining. I look forward to seeing you throughout the semester. Take care, everybody.